Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our books launch this afternoon, coming to you live from the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre, as we say, on this Friday afternoon. I'm inclined to wait a couple of minutes to let people join us, and as I do so, just to say thank you so much for taking the time to be here and to share with us in this really positive occasion. A moment in our centre's life. It's something very positive, I think, and something we want to celebrate with you for the next hour or so. So I am conscious the time that it is. It's Friday afternoon, and some of us are just about standing at the end of the week, and some of us are full of life, looking forward to the weekend, whichever you are. But I think we might start, and again, just to say thank you for being here, and you're welcome. I'm guessing that people here will know who I am, but just in case and for the record, my name is John Canavan. I'm a professor in the School of Political Science and Sociology at NUI Galway here, and for today's event, most importantly, I'm the director of the UNESCO Child and Family Research Centre and an author on one of the publications we're launching. And before we get into the business, I want to just say a few words from my own perspective as director of the centre. I'm struck in particular, there's 2 points I would really like to make. I was thinking about this a lot over the last few weeks. And the first is just to think about these books as a culmination of work, an endeavour by authors, editors, contributors. And we're talking about academics, but we're also talking about practitioner and policy people and people from civil society generally. And in our centre, you know, a publication, they're 10 a penny if you want. We are continuously producing things, whether that's for policy or practice. And we've journal articles, and kind of like the elite sports people, you know, it's actually all about the next game or the next ball, or for the most elite sports people of all, the next dart, perhaps, if you want to say. For us, it's kind of like this is our job, and that's great. But actually, it's a little bit more, and there is something wonderful about a book, and there is something tremendously special and important about a book. And it demands that we actually take the time to acknowledge that and to say to ourselves, well done, and to say to our colleagues, well done. But also, if you want, to reflect on what all this means at some level and its value. And that's why we're here today. So the second point I wanted to make, and this is prompted by my colleague Anne Byrne, and I don't know if Anne has joined us or been able to join us this afternoon, but she prompted me a long time ago on the notion of warrant. And that's my second point. As a group of academics, we are privileged to have the right and the expectation to undertake research, to create knowledge based on that research. And in our field, we engage with the world, we engage with ordinary people, we engage with service providers, we engage with practitioners, we engage with managers, and so on. Sometimes we are trying to create knowledge for knowledge, and sometimes we are trying to create knowledge that actually makes a difference in the lives of people, and in our case, particularly children, young people, and families. So the collection of books that we're launching today reflects that intent. But what's central to them is an ethical commitment to the people that we do the work with and for, sometimes work that's co-created with us. So doing right by people who help us and support us is key to us. It's key, if you want. Also, what's also key is that we have this government commitment, we have this societal commitment to research. Whether it's applied or not, I don't really mind. But we shouldn't take it for granted ever. And we have a tremendous responsibility in our roles. And again, this is, I suppose, what these books do, should I say, is demonstrates hopefully that we are enacting that warrant, that we are taking it seriously, and we want you to keep giving us that warrant. So for today, the order of proceedings, we will hear from Professor Jim Livesey, NUI Galway's Vice President for Research and Innovation. And I'll introduce Jim in a moment. Then we'll hear a little bit about each of the books. Carmel Devaney will talk about understanding systems change in child protection and welfare. Carol McGregor will talk about support and protection across the life course. Bernardine Brady will talk about narrative approaches and narrating childhood with children and young people. And Danielle Kennan will talk about child and youth participation in policy, practice, and research. And again, just to highlight the work that goes into this, Carmel is speaking on behalf of Carolyn McGregor, Aileen Shaw, and myself. Caroline McGregor is speaking on behalf of Pat and herself. Bernardine is speaking on behalf of Lisa Moran, who is an alumnus of our centre and of the university and of the school, and currently based in WIT. And also on behalf of Kathy Riley, our colleague in the School of Geography and Archaeology. And Danielle is speaking on behalf of herself and Deirdre Horgan, forgive me, Deirdre, from UCC. So just to say thank you for everybody's participation and taking the time to talk about their work today. Then my colleague, Professor Pat Dolan, the UNESCO Chair in Children, Youth and Civic Engagement, will say a few words on the impact of the books at global level and how he sees them. So we don't have a formal Q&A aspect for our launch, but if you do want to say something or ask a question or make a comment, please use the chat function. So now I would just like to introduce Professor Jim Livesey, NUI Galway's Vice President for Research and Innovation. And Jim has kindly agreed to launch the books. So I don't know if he's got a virtual bottle of champagne or anything to smash it against, but no doubt he'll find some appropriate way to launch the books. Jim is an historian by trade, by background, and he's only arrived in NUI Galway in the last year or so after a stellar career, starting in Cork, for which we'll forgive him, but most recently coming from Dundee in Scotland with various appointments along the way, including Harvard. Critically, Jim has led the development of the university's new research strategy, among many other roles that he has, and no doubt will be driving its implementation in the years ahead. So listen, thank you, Jim, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks so much, John, and for the forgiveness. You know, and it's glad to see there's another core person involved, Dr. Horgan. I've got a couple of bits and pieces to say, but the first thing that must be said is to pause and to congratulate all the authors and all the contributors. And I know there's a huge community of practice that sits behind these publications today. The worst flaw of people like myself is that we are constantly thanking you for the eaten bread and very quickly forgetting it and moving on to the next thing. And I will, of course, gesture to the next thing. But I think it's really important to pause and to look to our colleagues and to congratulate them and to share that warmth. And I think it bears remarking that at this stage in what has been a very difficult couple of years, late on a Friday afternoon, when we all have Zoom fatigue, to have over 50 people turn up to the book launch is itself a testimony to the strength of your community of practice and that ethic of care that community has for one another within it. So I just want to congratulate the authors particularly, but really that community from which that work emerges as a real example of the kind of world we want to live with. And I want to say this is my second moment of interaction with colleagues in IMAS this week. And that I think is testimony. And the other one was a seminar, a very active seminar. Pat was really strongly involved in that. I think that's testimony to the manner in which IMAS is radiating an effect out with itself, often in ways you guys aren't aware of, right? These centers of practice, these places where there's energy, where there's excitement, where there's engagement, they draw attention to themselves. And people who don't know that they're interested in the topics that you guys are concerned with as part of your technical research find themselves compelled and engaged and mobilized because of the warmth, but also the power, the intellectual power that you guys are bringing to bear, right? So I congratulate the authors and the collaborators, but I also want to admire and respect the world of practice from which this work emerges. And then I want to gesture a little bit to where do we take this, right? Because as John pointed out, I am responsible for the implementation and driving the university's research strategy. And you'll know that one of our ambitions is to identify the areas where we have genuine transformative potential. And I think any reasonable person will see ILAS and the community for which it stands as one of those areas in which genuine transformative potential really exists in this university. And when I was preparing to give these remarks, I just went and I looked around at what I assumed would be a universe in which the work that you're doing and the questions you're pursuing are very strongly supported by external institutional partners and by challenge mechanisms. And I find there aren't really. I mean, there are, and you guys have done an amazing job of putting together a network of international partnerships and of philanthropic partners, and state partners who are supportive of your work and are very interested in your work. But at that level, where the European Union is defining its Pillar 2 research agendas, or sustainable development goals, right? Or the global challenge work that's going on in some of the foundations, children are nowhere at the heart. And they are often mentioned in lots and lots and lots of these areas. And there's a kind of a gesturing to the cumulative effect toward children. But nobody seems to be owning and defining a research agenda which recognizes children and development as a central organizing research thematic, and adverting to the specificity and I think the real promise of the research methodologies and the ethics with which you approach this. So I look at this wonderful work, I look at this wonderful community. I find myself sucked into areas that are not my own, which I find myself engaging because of the excitement. And I suppose my challenge to the community, and I want to support you in this, is how do we now project and make evident to the outside world that actually the ethical concerns at the heart of your work should not be, as it were, supplementary to or part of bigger challenges. These need to be at the heart of some challenge mechanisms. And I look forward to working with you to project that message into important fora in the coming years. All right. I want to pause here, congratulate everyone else again, and hand back to John to hear the people that we really should listen to, who are, of course, the authors.
Thank you, Jim, very much for your words of encouragement and support for our efforts here in the Centre and in the Institute, and it's much appreciated by us all. So we'll move on then just to talk a little bit about the publications, and I'm going to ask Carmel to tell us a little bit about our Systems Change book. Handing over to you, Carmel. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for your attendance here. So I have a few slides. If you just bear with me, I'll get them up. Great, so I think they're good to go there. So as John said, I'm introducing the Understanding Systems Change in Child Protection and Welfare text. And this is an edited collection that John, myself, Caroline, and Aileen were the lead editors for. And there's a number of contributors who I'm pleased to see there's quite a few of them here today. So essentially, this is an edited collection which provides an account of a multifaceted national systems change programme, which aimed to strengthen the capacity of TUSLA, which is Ireland's statutory child protection and welfare agency, as most of you will know, in the areas of prevention, early intervention, and family support. So the Systems Change Programme is known as Prevention, Partnership and Family Support, PPFS for short, and it was funded by Atlantic Philanthropies Ireland And it essentially involved 5 comprehensive integrated components to deliver and enhance the existing provision in TUSLA and also in its partner agencies, its funded partner agencies. And the essence of the PPFS programme involved increasing investment in services which effectively seek to prevent the entry of children and young people into that very child protection and welfare system through earlier intervention, through supporting families, and through an increased emphasis on the rights of children and young people, the rights of parents and families, and participation of those same children, young people and families in services that they were engaged in. And I suppose the challenges in the Irish system and the consequent reforms that TUSLA engaged in very much mirror the issues faced by child protection and welfare systems globally. This effort at protecting children and preventing and responding to child abuse, while also trying to support parents and families, is a significant societal policy and service industry challenge. So it's not unique to Ireland, and certainly there's been many debates and many reforms internationally that have tried to do similar efforts to the PPFS programme. So we were tasked with carrying out a 4-year mixed method study on the programme, and that has produced, I suppose, a suite of Irish evidence on the programme, which has been informed by the key stakeholders, so critically by those children and young people, which Jim referred to, and as well by the practitioners, the managers and the policymakers, all who were very much involved in the design and implementation of the programme. And that suite of research is available on our website, on the Child and Family Research Centre website. But this collection then in particular focused on 3 areas. So it explored the change process and its components. So, detailed design and methods, which looked at all of the individual components within the programme, but also the kind of overall systems change and how that process evolved and the impact that it had. And then it also looked at the, I suppose, unique university agency partnership, which was required to both, to support the research programme. And that, I suppose, is one of the unique aspects of the collection. So essentially, we've provided an honest, detailed and reflexive account of real-world research. That's what this text includes. And in doing so, we've considered the enablers and the barriers to both the implementation of the programme and the outcomes that it has achieved. We've reflected on the breadth of the research design and the methods. So really trying to, consider the particular benefits and challenges in the designs and in the methods used. And we've drawn together the experiences of the agency research partnership, identifying the necessary elements for success. So, what contributed to the success of this evaluation and research, but also highlighting the risks and pitfalls that inevitably occurred during the 4-year process. And at a wider level, then, we've distilled our learning to inform the design, the implementation, and the evaluation of child protection and welfare systems and efforts in that regard globally. And notably, this knowledge is a resource for a broader range of human service organisations with a focus on a systems theoretical approach, in particular in relation to organisational culture and climate, in relation to implementation science, and in relation to leadership. And aligned with the university strategy, as Jim referred to, this text very much demonstrates and is a reflection of our commitment to engaged research, which enhances policy and enhances society. And it's, I suppose, very much part of our effort to include children, young people and family in research, and also in terms of designing and developing the services within which they're engaged with. So I suppose we plan to continue to develop our unique partnership with the TUSLA, the Child and Family Agency, but also the wider social service industry. to contribute to the ongoing debates in this area, to contribute to the challenges that are faced in this area, and also to continue to contribute to our commitment in relation to enhancing participation of those that use and need social services, and also their involvement, as I say, in the research, the evaluation, and the service planning and delivery. So we trust that this text will be of benefit and that you will enjoy it, and that it'll, I suppose, be of use to practitioners, to policymakers, and those that are involved in the wider social service industry. So thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Caroline McGregor now.
Delighted, first of all, to say thanks, Carmen, for presenting. I feel really privileged today to have been involved in the book that's just been presented, and now to speak on behalf of Professor Pat Dolan and I in relation to support and protection across the life course, a practical approach for social work. And just before I'd talk about the book, I suppose just an acknowledgement, this is a slightly different style of book in the sense that it's a textbook for social work, for our social work students and students nationally and internationally. But it's also, I suppose, meant to be for much wider interest in relation to other professions and in relation to, I suppose, hopefully the general public as well, in terms of giving an understanding about social work. And it's very much, as you'll hear from me in the short time that I'm going to speak for, it's very much informed by the research that has been carried out both in the centre and by our colleagues that we partner with. And also I want to kind of give an acknowledgement that it's been a little bit of a, it's emerged over a number of years. You can see me smiling. I'm really, like, we write a lot, and I'm delighted. I'm really pleased with these books that we're presenting today. They really have a background of so much partnership, working with our colleagues in the centre, with our practitioner colleagues, with our students. And I think for this book, I really want to acknowledge our social work students, past and present, because part of how we develop our ideas and part of how we've developed our understanding is from the dialogue and the teaching with the students. This book forms a module that Pat and I have taught together for a number of years, and to line up with the book, we changed the name to Support and Protection Across the Life course this year. There's sort of 5, the book kind of covers, is presenting social work within a framework around support and protection, and very much sort of reflecting social work within a life course context. And it presents a 5-level framework, and we're kind of concepts as sort of a scaffold for understanding social work. So first we talk about the duality of protection and support, and very much see that all social work, either explicitly or implicitly, is very much about balancing in a very complex context between care and control, regulation and support and protection. The second feature of the framework is looking at life transitions and life events, and especially understanding when life course becomes disrupted. We're so often involved with children, families and adults when they're at a point in their lives where there is a disruption or a transition for one reason or another. The third feature of the framework is health and well-being, and very much drawn from an international perspective, really thinking about our practice in the context of health inequalities, and the kind of barriers that affect people's health and well-being, both individual issues, but also wider social structural issues. The fourth feature of the framework that Pat and I have developed is emphasizing intergenerational relations. And that's sort of so central to the work that we do. Like it's ironic really that many of our services are delivered by children, broken into children, adult services. And yet in reality, most issues are across generations, between grandparents looking after children caring for their parents, also generational in relation to communities, and intergenerational in relation to how the historical generations affect our present day. And then the final feature of the framework is a focus on civic engagement and partnership. And we've really benefited from the exceptional work of the centre and Pat's own work and colleagues focusing on civic engagement and promoting the idea of engagement on the principles of citizenship, where we can't deny kind of the power relations and power balances that often happen, but trying to kind of think and conceptualize in the context of working co-production and working through citizenship and partnership. Now, kind of we position the book within two sort of really kind of sound, solid theoretical frameworks. One, an ecological framework, which encourages us to look at people within their complex environment and at a number of different levels. And we kind of cover that in detail in the book. And secondly, sort of thinking about it from the life course perspective. So just a few kind of features. I hope that people will be interested to have a look at the book. Pat and I are very happy to be contacted about it and to come and talk to practitioners and colleagues and students if you're interested to do it. We see it very much as a work in progress. While the book got finished, it got finished with an ending to say there's so much more to do. And I guess the key kind of messages that we're sending is the importance of us continuing to develop our ideas, building on global as well as Indigenous and local knowledge, really moving beyond valuing theoretical and conceptual ideas, but seeing those as one of a number of pillars of expertise that guide our work. The expertise of practitioners, the importance of practice-based research, the importance of working with people who are directly supported by services, who experience services, and doing that within a partnership basis. And then the final slide, which I would have had if they'd worked, is sort of highlighting the framework framed within ecological model and life course, but really emphasizing two terms that I'll just sort of finish with. One, super diversity. We need to work so hard to reach individuals, children, families, young people, adults who tend to be most marginalized in society. And we've so much more work to do to find ways to engage in our work, reaching out to those who find it hardest maybe to reach in or to find their way to us. And secondly, intersectionality in terms of connecting between our different systems, between disciplines, between organizations, and so on. And just to finish, we've developed, it's not groundbreaking, I don't think, sorry Pat, no offense, but we talk about the term critical art. And we really like this framework, that what we want to leave you with is we're not writing this book to say we've figured it all out, but we're inviting you to engage in critical analysis, critical reflection, and critical thinking T. And the book is very much designed around encouraging that. So I hope that you will look at the book, and really happy to be contacted about it. And thank you very much, everybody. And I'm going to pass over now to my esteemed colleague, Bernadine. You're
to unmute. Yeah. Thanks, Caroline, and hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here this evening. So I'm just going to share my screen, and let's hope I'm successful with that. Is that working okay? Yeah, great. Okay. So I'm just going to speak to you this evening about a book I co-edited with Dr. Lisa Moran, who, as John said, was formerly with NUI Galway, then Edge Hill, and now she's in Waterford Institute of Technology. And also Dr. Kathy Riley, who's here this evening from the School of Geography and Archaeology. So the three of us were involved in editing this volume. So the focus of the book is on a qualitative research method known as narrative research. So for those of you not familiar with narrative, it's essentially about storytelling. So the act of storytelling, as we know, is something that's shared among all cultures and all age groups. And we all tell stories on a day-to-day basis about things that have happened to us, be they macro or micro. So essentially, narrative research, it's a form of research that elicits and studies people's stories as a means of understanding their life experiences. So one of the key strengths of narrative research is that the storyteller is given the power to shape their narrative or story in the way that they see fit. So stories and narrative research as a method then can be done through the spoken word, through narrated stories, through written stories, through art, creativity, music, and so on, and also increasingly through the use of digital methods. So as a method, I suppose, when used with children and young people, narrative research can enable children and young people to tell stories about their lives in a relatively organic way And it's been described as providing a portal into their life experiences. So a way of us just to understand through their eyes what something has felt like. So from the stories that they tell, I suppose with our social science hat on, we can begin to understand how wider social, political, and cultural factors impact on their lives and on their experiences of inclusion and exclusion. So I suppose, why did we decide to edit this book? So over the past decade, and particularly, I suppose, 2 decades, there's been an increased use of narrative research approaches with children and young people. But I suppose the existing literature out there, while there are books on narrative research, it's mostly related to research with adults. So there was definitely a gap there in terms of a focus specifically on the use of narrative research with children and young people. I suppose we recognized as well that there are a broad range of disciplines engaged in undertaking narrative research, so including sociology, geography, social work, to name but a few, and also undertaking narrative research in a range of settings. So we felt that it was worth trying to map some of that diversity and I suppose to share learning across all these various settings and approaches, and I suppose to showcase a lot of the different methods that are used, and also then to try and share ideas and challenges that have been experienced and ways of overcoming them. So some of the key features of the book, we have 17 chapters in total, which were meticulously read and edited by ourselves. We have a broad range of disciplines and contributors, from sociology, from geography, from education, social work, and social care. So the bulk of the book chapters are essentially stories of everyday life from children and young people in various settings, from the early years to schools, to the family home, to children and communities. And we also have stories from particular groups of young people, such as Indigenous youth in Canada and Muslim youth in the west of Ireland and homeless youth in Dublin, who have very unique experiences. The chapters in the book encompass a very diverse range of methods, including narrative interviews, essay writing, mapping techniques, photography and digital methods, longitudinal methods, participatory methods, and that's just even scratching the surface. And in the book, we also reflect on the history of narrative research and its theoretical underpinnings and so on, and also reflect at the end on the future challenges facing narrative research. So just to finish, I suppose why maybe we think this book is important. It's the first multidisciplinary collection focusing on narrative research with children and youth. It provides a comprehensive introduction to the field, I suppose, for people not familiar with narrative research, or particularly narrative research with children. It's a very good starting point in terms of mapping the territory. The content of the book then, in terms of the empirical research, provides a nuanced understanding of children's lived realities in a whole range of settings, as I said. It also showcases the range of methodological approaches in use, which is likely to be of interest to researchers considering different approaches. So I suppose all in all, we identify the current strengths in the field, the challenges, and also the opportunities. And taken together, I suppose we hope that this book has helped to advance the theory and scholarship relating to narrative research with children. And we also very much map some of the issues going forward in terms that need more attention. For example, the need for more narrative research, or to hear the voices of children more from the global south, and also more attention to the ethical dimensions of narrative. Another issue, I suppose, aligned to the increased use of digital technology for narrative research is just the digital divide and the fact that using technology may mean that you're silencing particular voices and prioritizing others. So these are just some of the challenges that we raise in the book in terms of the future direction of narrative research. So thank you very much, and thank you to all our contributors, many of whom are here. I'm going to hand you over now to my colleague Danielle to talk about her publication. Thank you.
You're on mute, Danielle.
Sorry, why do we always make the mistake? And I thought I was very organized sharing my screen quickly there. So I was just saying thanks, Bernadine, and good afternoon to all of you. And this book is an edited collection on children's participation in the public context of policy, research and practice. So it's published by Routledge, and just to say at the outset, entirely coincidental that we chose the same book cover as our colleagues. Perhaps our thinking is very aligned overall, because I mean, out of 60 plus possible book covers, we, unbeknownst to each other, chose the same one, but it's not part of a series. It is a distinct publications. So I co-edited this book with Deirdre Horgan. Deirdre is a senior lecturer in social policy in the School of Applied Social Science in UCC. And perhaps the sign of the times, but Deirdre and I have only actually ever met once in person. And that was actually before this publication process was even initiated. But, you know, through the use of good technology, a very good working relationship, we managed the process on, you know, to successful completion entirely online. And it was a real pleasure to work with Deirdre on this book. So it's also, the book, to say, is an initiative of the Children's Research Network in Ireland and Northern Ireland. The idea actually emerged at a CRN, as we call it, conference in 2017. Where the theme of the conference was on children and young people's participation. And it was thought that an edited volume would really present the opportunity to capture the learning generated in Ireland following the implementation of a wide range of participatory initiatives spanning research, policy and practice. So Ireland has very much emerged at the forefront of promoting and implementing child and youth participatory approaches. It really offers a very interesting case study whereby the government have championed and invested in child and youth participation since the turn of the last decade. Now, we all know, you know, this wasn't always the case. I certainly remember as a child growing up in 1980s Ireland, you know, that distinctly remembering, and I hasten to add outside my own immediate family context, but distinctly remember that feeling that if I spoke up, I wouldn't be taken seriously. Even if I did speak up, you know, the sense that you would be excluded from key decisions that were directly relevant to your lives, or to my life. And I think just as Catherine McGuinness really sums it up very well in one of the prominent child protection inquiry reports in the early 1990s, when she said, you know, at that time, there was an unwritten rule in Irish society that children should be seen and not heard. But certainly since the turn of the last decade, even a little bit earlier, there has been a significant shift in the role that children and young people play in policy making, in research and in practice. And Deirdre and I and colleagues in the Children's Research Network, and some who I see are here with us today, you know, really felt it was important at this time to take stock and to really capture the learning generated in the implementation of these, you know, wide range of innovative initiatives happening in Ireland. So in terms of this book and its contribution to knowledge, it really conceptualizes a rights-based participatory approach. It showcases constructive and innovative rights-based participatory approaches, and then it interrogates, of course, the challenges and the complexities in the implementation of such approaches. So turning to each of these quickly, you know, in terms of conceptualizing a rights-based approach, we were very fortunate to have one of the leading thinkers in this field, Professor Laura Lundy, whose rights-based model of participation underpins Ireland's national policy framework in this area, and she was one of the key contributors to the book. Then in terms of showcasing rights-based participatory approaches, across the domains of research, policy and practice, we do this from the perspective of not only scholars, but also policymakers and practitioners, offering real-world guidance and reflections on the implementation of such approaches. And also multidisciplinary perspectives inform these reflections, with contributions from the arts, healthcare, social work, childhood studies, social policy and education. So really reflecting on the involvement of children and youth in decision-making across a range of different contexts. So the book then also identifies emerging themes, reflecting really on the key enablers, along with the challenges and complexities in embedding a rights-based participatory approach. So just running through some of these very quickly, a key enabler certainly is the importance of a strong legal and policy framework and a shared understanding of that concept of participation. So Professor Laura Lundy and Anne O'Donnell, who is formerly the head of the Citizen Engagement Unit within the Department of Children, they provide, open the book with really a fascinating insight into that partnership working between a civil servant and an academic with expertise in children's rights, and how through that partnership, they really embedded the Lundy model of participation within Ireland's national policy framework. The presence of key structures and mechanisms is another key enabler, and specifically the value of children and youth advisory panels in bringing children and young people's voice to the fore is discussed widely within the text. Then the recognition of the relational dimension of child and youth participation and the importance of mobilizing champions is also key. So a number of the chapters really highlight the need for adult allies or champions to really facilitate meaningful participation. Then the value of innovative and creative working practices really comes to the fore throughout the book. Many of the chapters outline a range of structured but creative initiatives or activities that really can be adopted to facilitate children to express their views and to allow for both the verbal and the visual voice, as we describe in the book. Then the persistent challenge of adequately giving voice, of course, to seldom heard children is very much evident throughout the book. But yet a number of chapters in the book do either propose strategies or outline program models to increase the participation of seldom heard children. Then the need for formalized feedback mechanisms is another persistent challenge. And without it, of course, it raises the question, what is all this participation for? So the theme of feedback and accountability features very prominently also. And lastly, the need for investment and resourcing, particularly in terms of time and financial resourcing to enable meaningful participation, again, is well established and evident across many of the chapters in the book as a key challenge going forward. So just to conclude, I want to finish by saying, well, the book focuses very much on rights-based participatory approaches in Ireland. The right of a child to be heard is a strategic priority in Europe and other global regions, really underscored by the universal ratification of the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. So there is much learning here to be gained, by international audiences, much learning from the experiences and the perspective of practitioners, policymakers and researchers operating within this field in Ireland. So that's it for me, and thank you. I'll pass over back to John now.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you, colleagues, for your succinct presentations on the books. That was really, really helpful and instructive. So just to move on to the next speaker at our launch this afternoon. So it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Pat Dolan to say a few words. So Pat, as you will know, is the UNESCO Professor in Children, Youth and Civic Engagement based at NUI Galway here in our centre in the Institute of Life Course and Society, of which he is the director. So I'm not going to say too much because you could spend a long time talking about Pat and what he does and so on. But I will say a few things, or maybe say one sentence. And I suppose the sentence I want to say is that at a personal level, I'm continuously in awe of his intelligence, his energy, his commitment, and his essential goodness, and how he applies that in his day-to-day work and life. I mean that genuinely. Pass, I just hand over to you.
Thanks, Sean. That's incredibly kind. I don't know if it's totally deserved, but I'll definitely accept it. I take compliments wherever I get them. But thank you very much indeed. I suppose to start, first of all, by saying it's really on just hearing the work that we all have put in, and including myself and that everybody who's with each other together separately, and we're a bit like hits of the 80s where we're on each other's albums, but it's or the 90s or the 2000s. But it's really good the way that actually interdisciplinary work and professionals working together is key. And I think one of the things that we don't appreciate enough, particularly in applied social sciences or applied sociology, is the importance of collaboration rather than a siloed approach to producing any kind of a publication. And I myself am very aware of the amount of work that we all have, and not just those that have spoken, all the many others who are joining us today and those that have contributed. And thanks to you, John, as director of the Centre for not just your kind words, but for coordination. Just to say, really, this is a crucial part of what ILAS is about, because in our title, it's an Institute for Life Course and Society. And if you think about that question, how do we, in our work as producers of any kind of product, produce something that can influence civic society? It's by the power of the pen in many cases, as well as our teaching. It's by the power of what we write and what we produce, which I think is very considered. With my UNESCO chair hat on, I think it really struck me that two of the crucial kind of beacons or kind of guiding lights in UNESCO is management of social transformations policy, which is UN policy, and of course the very well-known global sustainable goals. And speaking to the first one first, it struck me that what does social transformation actually mean? Social transformation is about changing where people are at in their lives in some way and how we can impact on that. And the turning of research, theory, practice, engagement with young people, engagement with families, engagement with services, and engagement with systems is how you make social transformations. That's how you enable social transformation. So all four books really speak to that at a very important level. And within the Sustainable Development Goals, it strikes me that very often when people think of the Sustainable Development Goals, of the 17, the two that they always know are number 13, which is about climate risk and climate harm and climate challenge, which of course is a huge global concern. And I would make the point that it took Greta to teach many people to know about that, in fairness to Greta, across civic society. And the third one that people would think about is goal number 7, which is around sustainable energy. They're the ones that people think about. But it's ironic because actually the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly with the 2030 agenda, is actually more about social and human than climate. It's about people, and it's about us as people, no matter where we live. And the great thing for me about all these 4 books is that they actually contribute to those key human goals, whether that's goal 1, which is around hunger, goal 2, which is poverty, goal 3, which is around well-being, or goal 4, which is around education. And in the widest way we can think about those 4 things, or even if it's around goal 11, which is around sustaining communities. But importantly, and this is really what I think struck me listening to everybody speaking today across the four books, and Jim indeed as well, is that it's about goal 17. It's about how do we work in partnership, and that's the key one at the end of the Sustainable Development Goals, is how we bring it all together. And rather than trying to do a repeat of what you've heard more eloquently than I can do it from my 4 colleagues in Carmel, Bernadine, Caroline, and Danielle around the different books, I think just to do a slight attempt at the Eurovision, you know, the bit at the end where you give 10 seconds of each song. But there is a link that really struck me on listening that I hadn't thought about, actually. So in terms of understanding systems, when Carmel was talking about that, that really to me spoke about systems as an ecological model, the systems of people who commission services, who research services, who organize services, and particularly around family support and prevention. That really came across very strongly about how we organize ourselves. And Caroline, in which I had the honor of working with Caroline on our book, in Caroline's sharing, I thought about, obviously, about life course, and about how life course is not any one particular stage, it's the wider system, and how we bring transition and all the impacts, life events, everything that comes into that, and how we can influence social work knowledge and practice that makes a difference in human interaction with people by being present for them. And again, on that ecological model. And then certainly, I think really appropriately, both Bernadine and Danielle, Bernadine firstly in bringing up listening to voices of children, narratives, what is it that young people are actually saying? And, you know, enabling that voice is where the reality of anything we organize actually in helping anybody or working with anybody comes to the fore. And whether that's listening to a young person in Dublin who's homeless, or whatever that might be within their story, understanding that narrative is key to how we organize the whole system to make lives better. And by no means last or least, and again, I had the pleasure of working with Danielle on the participation book. It's not just about listening to children and their participation, whether that's as youth, as researchers, or all the things we do. It's actually about what do you do about what they tell us. It's not just about asking their opinion, it's what do you do about it. So I think it really speaks to a really nice collection or an agenda that brings together actually, you know, the whole purpose of social research is about having impact. And impact includes advocacy, and it includes enablement of a better life for people. But it's also about you doing that on a foundation of robust social science knowledge, robust theory that we turn into practice and policy messages. So I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be involved in this launch. And I have to say, it's very heartening to think of the work that we've produced as a community. And as John Pinkerton, who's our great colleague in Queen's University, reminds us always, ever onward. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Pat, for your words. Okay, so it's back to me then. And yeah, so just to say thanks to Pat and to our colleagues who have just provided the accounts of the books. Thanks particularly to Jim Livesey for his launching of the books today. And to say a particular thanks to those people who've come and participated in our event. What I'd like to say, just by way of finish for myself, is again, it's really nice to be here. It's a privilege to be here, and hopefully we can have many more events. It has been, as people have pointed out in the chat, it has been a difficult few years for us, but it is interesting what can be achieved, and I suppose it's a testament to the colleagues that we've achieved as much. Maybe a final point, just to say, Gillian has provided information around the books in the chat. So if you're interested, you'll be able to follow up there. And I think we're pretty much on time. I know Danielle has to go, like everybody else, there's other family duties and so on to follow up. But just say thanks again to all of the contributors and collaborators. We really appreciate your efforts in creating these publications. And thank you very much. And finally, just to say thanks to Aileen Shaw, who's been part of the organising group with myself, and of course, the renowned at this stage, Gillian Brown, for her work in making things happen. And thanks to Cormac on the technology. So we'll call it quits and wish you safe travelling if you're travelling, and safe travelling from the kitchen or from the office to the kitchen to make the dinner. Right, so well, we'll take care, everybody, and we'll see you soon, and thanks for coming. Bye now.